Welcome to The Platform, your Saturday morning show on TVC News Nigeria. My name is Sam Omashe. I promise you an interesting time on the program today. Let's start with my published article in the Nation newspaper titled, "Is That the Law?" Imagine that in the course of investigating the source and sinners behind the over $43 million, no one is caught and the story peters out. Imagine further that names roll out, filed before the court, get judgment that releases them back into the halcyon luxury of their homes. The names go home not as a roll call of the damned, but the justified of the land. Imagine also that in the grass cutter saga, Babachiri David Lawal, secretary to the federal government, fizzes gloriously out of sight as quickly as he has snapped into scandal. It is this scenario that propelled me in the past few weeks to herald the virtue of justice over law. It is not enough that the law should acquit a person. The society should know that it has had justice. They believe that the law is the end of all things. But as Apostle Paul said, the law is only a schoolmaster and a shadow of a better spirit, the spirit of the law. Students of history know that know what damage the law can inflict. Was it not the law that locked Nelson Mandela away for 27 years? Was it not the law that made blacks less human in America and hanged Ken Saro-Wiwa in this country? When law does not serve justice, we have nothing but the tyranny of lawyers who work for the despotic and manipulative elite. Ifedakpo Adams Adedikpe, in response to my column the previous week, ran away at a tangent. He described my comments as, quote, unfair and unjust attack on judges and lawyers. As the lawyer who argued the matter for Patience Jonathan, he goes on, I can confirm to you, sir, that the EFCC did not appear in court, neither did it file any form of defense. To expect a judge to nonetheless wait for EFCC at its own pleasure to come to court is to expect too much from the courts. And regrettably, he goes on, for a senior journalist to conclude without knowing all the facts show how human we all are after all. Before I address those jabs, that's Adedikpe talking. Now, before I address those jabs, let me reiterate his confirmation of my agony with the so-called senior advocates of Nigeria. How could a man who has risen to the top of the bracket or to the top bracket of lawyers truly want to defend a woman who was first lady and who had no job by law and even in practice except being an absentee permanent secretary in Bayelsa State? He says EFCC could not keep the court waiting for too long. Some cases have been in court for about a decade and they have thrived on dubious technicalities. And behind any such delayed case is a son. Because Adedikpe was clouded by his case, he could not read my article for truth the way he reads his own law for technicalities to defend the ilk of Mama Peace. I investigated and found the disgust of a judge who hurriedly asked for the money to be released to the woman. Most sons have rigged the law for the elite and they are partners in darkness. Just as Bassanio in Merchant of Venice, that's Shakespeare's play, we need avenging angels of technicalities who bend the law for justice. They know the law is an ass, but will not allow it to ride us.
Ogun State Governor Ibikunle Amosun was the man of the moment during a condolence visit to the family compound of late Senator Isiaka Adeleke. Some people have jocularly referred to him as Voltron, the defender of the universe. Governor Amosun physically shielded an aide to the governor of the state of Osun, Idiat Babalola, from the wrath of her people.
The mob would say exactly what the problem was, but from all indication, I heard them call me traitor, call me all sort of names.
But that is not the story. The real story is a growing rage of the masses against political leaders. In 2015, we saw a near mob action against Muazu Babangida Aliu, former governor of Niger State. The women of southern Kaduna pelted their governor Nasir El-Rufai, who they accused of aiding and abetting the murderous Fulani headsmen on rampage in their communities. A member of the House of Representatives in Niger State was also attacked by angry members of his constituents. He was lucky to have escaped. In Katsina State, during a function organized by the All Progressives Congress, there was tension and pandemonium when youths went berserk and attacked a member of the Federal House of Representatives from Katsina.
Well, we could see from all of this that the people are getting increasingly restive and angry. In the case of Osun State, you could see that the people were getting angry because of information, the facts of which they did not even clearly know. They seem to be mourning more than the bereaved, because the bereaved say, we don't know what caused the death of their son and father, Adeleke, but they are already, as it were, made judgment. But that itself is a part of a certain nationwide anger. Some people are saying they don't want to see the situation as bad as this. People are hungry, people are angry, people are disaffected, people are alienated. So we should be careful that the change agenda does not show that our people are in chains.
The 2017 appropriation bill has been lost and found. That depends on whether we choose to believe Danjuma Goje, Chairman Senate Committee on Appropriation. The Senate used the raid of the senator's residence by the police as another ploy to stall the passage of the 2017 budget.
We plan to bring this budget yesterday, to get it passed today, to send it to Mr. President by tomorrow or next tomorrow for his accent. Yes. But the process was truncated by the invasion of my house, whereby 18 files, a laptop, were carted away to nowhere. I don't know, whether to the police headquarters, I don't know. It's still with the police.
The police are saying that it is something to do with whistleblower. If it is to do with whistleblower, then, and that the whistleblower misled them. If somebody has given you wrong information, tell the public what you are doing with that person. If somebody did not give, and if it's an intelligence officer that got the house wrong, come out and tell us. But 5 days, nothing. I think, unfortunately, it's because of the respect of today, or that it should have come as a motion. These files that are still in police custody, that which Senator Goje has told us is affecting the work before us, also needs to be brought publicly and formally to him, because it was taken publicly in the open glare.
It's very interesting. He said, when was the time that Goje's house was raided? It was not that long ago that it was raided. This is 2017 budget, and we are almost in May. You don't have the budget. So any plan that any parastatal or ministry, or even the country has had since the beginning of this year cannot be put in motion. Are we really interested in development or routine? Or is it a way of the National Assembly trying to fight against the executive? And the executive has to suffer. And when the executive suffers, the whole country suffers, because the executive is responsible to implement all of these budgets. What this means is that we're in chaos. This was the problem we had with the Jonathan era, that we said that they didn't know how to begin a budget and how to end it. This one, we are having a very dramatic way of ending it. The police takes it away, and the senator puts all the documents in his house. And by way of a question, do they not have photocopies? Are they really serious about this budget, or they're just playing hanky-panky with the people? We need to know.
It really appears that press freedom is under threat in Nigeria. According to Press Freedom Index released by Reporters Without Borders, Nigeria ranked 122 out of 180 countries examined. journalists are being consistently harassed for simply doing their job. Kaduna State Governor Nasir El-Rufai is the biggest culprit in stifling press freedom. So far, about 6 journalists have been harassed, intimidated, and even charged to court over spurious allegations of writing stories not favorable to the government. The latest incident of an infringement of press freedom was carried out by Bashir Abubakar, the power-drunk and arrogantly ignorant Chief Security Officer to President Muhammadu Buhari. He claims that the reporter of Punch newspaper was wrong to write about the president's health. But the question is, did the reporter tell a lie? The president has missed 3 consecutive Federal Executive Council meetings, and we must talk about it.
And because the reporter spoke about it, an arrogant, ignorant CSO decided that it should be let out, without even consulting with the media team, because Femi Adesina said he knew nothing about it. The question I really have is, why is the CSO still there? Because what he has done is in contradiction to the very tenets of democracy. A person in the military martial spirit portraying himself as a defender of the president, when the president actually said the truth. Now we know that even the president now receives his files at home. His home in chief rather than commander in chief. Now, is that what we have? We have to be really interested in our democracy and to know that transparency is an important part of it. If anybody is not interested in transparency, he has no right being in Aso Rock. They have not yet told us whether that CSO has been reprimanded. And reprimand here cannot be done in secret. If you reprimand him in secret, you have not reprimanded him. We have to know what has been done. But the least that we expect, is that that man should not be in Aso Rock. Well, in everything happening in the politics, there is certainly room for comic relief. Here is a sketch about the suspended secretary to the government of the Federation, Babachir Lawal. You can see that it is done here in the background of grass, we call him grass cutter scandal. So you can see the 2 men. So the man in suit says, I hope you know this suspension is covert within covert. Then, and the other man, in native, responds, you mean covert within covert within covert? So in other words, there's a lot of hanky-panky going on in this story of Babachir Lawal and the suspension. Well, we only have to stay tuned to see what is going to happen in the course of the next 2 weeks. Well, there is a second one on the NIA and the SGF probe led by Vice President Yemi Osinbajo. In the ensuing conversation, which you see presently, a man peeps through the door and says, sorry, we have to finish the fight behind closed doors, while the other replies, we won't hear when you are shouting for help, because everything is still happening. People are saying this investigation should be done in the open. Well, we will see what happens in the next few weeks too. Yeah, for a bit of odd news, did you know that there is just one male northern white rhino left in the world? His name is Sudan, like Sudan, the country, and he needs help to make a last chance breeding effort to keep his species alive. So a Kenyan Wild Conservancy is teaming up with Tinder, a dating app, for a campaign called The Most Eligible Bachelor in the World. They are raising money for research to save the species from extinction. Sudan and its last 2 female companions are unable to breed naturally because of issues that include old age. The rhino's profile says, and I quote, I don't mean to be too forward, but the fate of the species literally depends on me. I perform well under pressure. Old Pejeta Conservancy and the app aim to raise $9 million for research into breeding methods, including in vitro fertilization, in an effort to save the species from extinction. The optimistic Sudan's profile will be seen in Tinder in 190 countries and over 40 languages. Sudan lives at the conservancy protected by guards around the clock. Within the two females, Najin and Fatu. With the two females, Najin and Fatu. Coming up is the big talk.
The government is fighting corruption within its system with, yes, cologne, Sasarobia, that sweet smelly Sasarobia cologne. But for outsiders, perceived enemies, critics, pluralists, opinionists, they use acid, they use pesticides, they use herbicides, they use insecticide, and all the other sides that can kill.
This is In the Mirror. What do Fulani herdsmen want? Do they want a grazing reserve? Do they want the freedom to continue their known nomadic way of life despite growing urbanization and increase in farmlands? Perhaps if we are able to identify what they really want and give it to them, the violence often blamed on them will stop. The Miyetti Allah Cattle Breeders Association says we have been unkind in attributing the attacks on the herdsmen. The group argues that the violence has nothing to do with grazing reserve, but mostly carried out by the foreigners and investigations by politicians and some in the clergy. But does this justify the killings and exonerate them from being prosecuted? No. Many communities in the north of Nigeria have faced severe attacks allegedly perpetrated by Fulani herdsmen. From 1996 to 2006, about 121 people were killed in Bauchi and Gombe states due to conflicts between Fulani herdsmen and farmers over trespassing and destruction of crops. We cannot readily forget Agatu killings. More than 500 villages in over 10 communities reportedly killed. Southern Kaduna crisis is still fresh. The federal government said 204 were killed as at January this year, but the Catholic Church disagrees. It says 808 lives were lost. We know this figure is higher because more attacks have been reported in the last few months. Nigeria is not alone in the quagmire, though. Kenya's north is also grappling with herdsmen assault. Last Sunday, Kuki Goldman, one of Kenya's most famous conservationists and the author of the best-selling book, I Dreamed of Africa, was shot and killed by herders. The attack on Goldman was the latest sign of the chaos and violence ripping through northern Kenya, an area celebrated for its wondrous wildlife, but plagued by lawlessness and drought. Dozens more have lost their lives come Baringa region and Laikipia, the area where a British rancher was also murdered last month. The government of both countries have deployed security agencies to combat the problem, but so far nothing worthy of note has been achieved. Fulani herdsmen continue to wreak havoc in Nigeria, just as President Muhammadu Buhari's silence on this issue is loud. Kenyan government, on the other hand, is increasingly distracted by national elections scheduled for August. The Nigerian Senate is considering a land grazing bill aimed at securing areas for Fulani herdsmen and mapping out of grazing routes. While many northern states have donated pieces of land to the project, the southern states are totally opposed to the idea. They said they cannot be forced to give out their land for this purpose. Africa needs to rise against this menace that is not less deadly than Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab insurgencies. I caught up with Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Mike Ozekhome, and amongst other topics, we discuss EFCC's bribery charge against him and other issues in the judiciary. Recently, we have been seeing a lot of money popping up from different parts of hidden places in the country. And in another context, we see that the EFCC is losing cases on corruption. They have lost 2, DSS lost 1, and the ICPC lost 1. It looks like corruption is fighting back.
All we are saying, fight corruption, yes, but within the legal regime, the legal organogram. We have a constitution. We are operating a constitutional democracy. We are not in Hobbesian state of nature. That's where exactly life was short, nasty, and brutish.
Yeah, Femi Falana had said that part of the problem with the war on corruption is that the government itself is not equipped to fight it. The EFCC does not have enough lawyers. They don't even have competent lawyers. They don't even have the money to fight corruption. And so what we have is a case of a probably just and impotent fighter for justice, fighting against a well-heeled machine of millionaire or multimillionaire SANs and their thieving clients.
It depends on how you view it. An organization that can hire 80 lawyers headed by 20 senior advocates, and some of these senior advocates receive between 30 and 50 million naira per case. I don't think it's a poor organization. Any budget they want, they give to the National Assembly and they approve, both for their buildings, for their equipment, for their computers, for everything. I do not think it is. Rather, it is a case of not really fighting corruption. But the best I can say, if I'm so generous for this government, and I will give that to them, I will say the best I can say for them, the best they have done is that they are recovering looted funds. That is not fighting corruption. Fighting corruption that is more cancerous and more endemic and more entrenched has to even start even from our homes, from the primary schools, from the nursery schools. When a rich person, a wealthy person, is gallanded with national honors, or he sits at the front pews in the church, or on the front mat in a mosque, or is given high-sounding chieftaincy titles, Ogbuefi one in the village, and is celebrated, you cannot say that the government has even started looking at corruption at all. They are just doing loot recovery. When the same government fighting so-called corruption, many of its own ministers and people within the kitchen cabinet and the presidency have tons and tons and trailer loads of allegations made against them in written petitions, but they do not look at it. They look the other side. I'm coming. Them, yeah. I don't want to dignify them by mentioning them.
We know the case, for instance, of Babachiri David Lawal, yes, who is now suspended.
The presidency not first come and defend him.
Defend him, yes.
The president first defended it that he has not done anything wrong. So I'm not expecting any outcome from that case.
Or the story
no,
of the chief
nothing.
Of Army Staff.
Yeah. The chief of Army Staff, for example, yes. Is that not so?
Yes.
He was said to have bought 2 houses in Dubai, worth about $1.5 million. Yes. The government came and defended him that he could have been investing in shares and the shares were multiplying. That was what
the case of the chief of staff.
Yes.
Who is both the chief of staff and a board member of the NNPC.
Of the NNPC. Now, corruption is even worse when it is nepotic. When you engage in cronyism, nepotism, tribalism, favoritism, even in appointments. It's a worst form of corruption. That was why Shehu Sani, senator, he said the government fights corruption within its own system with deodorant and fight opponents with pesticide. No, he said insecticide. Yes. I want to use stronger words. The government is fighting corruption within its system with yes, cologne, Sasarobia, you know, that sweet smelly Sasarobia cologne. But for outsiders, perceived enemies, critics, pluralists, opinionists, they use acid, they use pesticides, they use herbicides, they use insecticide, and all the other sides that can kill. That is not how to fight corruption. A lot of people will not believe you. If, for example, you defend people in government. In other crimes, in other society, let's look at the case of Magu, for example. They are suddenly inventing all manners of redress just to defend one man. I've always said we should build strong institutions. If we build strong institutions, we'll not be equating an institution to one man. President Buhari, may God get him well for us, he was abroad for 49 days. Heavens did not collapse. Oshibanjo acted and ably too as deputy. But when, as in America, the Senate has rejected a nominee, a presidential nominee, that is the end to it.
But let's go to that Senate matter and Magu. But first, you don't build institutions. Even in the United States and even in Britain, they are the two great models of institution building in history. You use individuals to build institutions.
It's the other way around.
It's individuals that build institutions.
Yeah, when it has started, you allow the institution
to take its role.
Yeah, to take
its role. But individuals will first of all build. It's chicken and egg thing. No. That's
the EFCC has been on since 2004. Yes. there was Enugu Ribadu. Yes. After him,
it was individualized.
After him,
it was individualized.
Which was wrong. That is why we are still having the individuality problem. Yes. After him, we had Mrs. Waziri. Farida Waziri. Yes. After her, we had an Ibrahim Lamode. Yes. Now we are now having an Ibrahim Magu. Yes. If you do not strengthen the institution itself to be able to take care of itself, we will continue to talk about individuals. And that is going to be, it can never be effective.
Now, Magu is acting chair of EFCC. But the question people have asked about the Senate is that almost half of you there are under investigation for corruption.
Then
how is the Senate itself positioned to even adjudicate on whether Magu should be chair when they know that man is after them?
So we should dissolve the Senate then. We should abolish the National Assembly then? Because the lack of democracy has always been the absence of the legislature. Because military governments combine law-making powers and law executing powers. Exactly. So the institution of the Senate must remain. The fact that some people have been accused, again, we have come back there. Exactly, to the issue. When you are accused, a mere accusation has not yet proven you guilty. Otherwise, Magu himself, if we use that argument, having himself been indicted by the DSS, who said he has failed the integrity test, he himself should not even be acting at all. But you see, when he pleases you people, you use the argument one way, and then you turn it around and somersault like Asian Babonalimi acrobats when he no longer pleases you. If that same argument will also go for Magu. Let me tell you this. Section 171, which many of them are banded. Yes. And you mentioned Femi Falana, that he was here last week and that he also spoke on that Section 171. They are misapplying Section 171. Section 171 of the Constitution is clear and simple. And the Constitution was passed in 1999, 5 years before the EFCC came into being through the EFCC Establishment Act No. 1 of 2004. Section 171 says the president can hire and fire and put in active capacity the following: Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Head of the Civil Service, Ambassadors and High Commissioners, personal staff of Mr. President. Yes. Have challenged them. Show me in any of them where EFCC is mentioned. it was never mentioned. Because unlike Nostradamus, the makers of the Constitution could not have seen an EFCC coming into being. Therefore, EFCC has to come into being through an instrument. What was that instrument that breathed life, breathed oxygen into it? It is the EFCC Act of 2004. And what does it say? It says, these are your powers. Then composition. Your composition is that under section 2, subsection 1, you shall have a board. The heads of ministries of foreign affairs, finance, ministries of foreign affairs, finance, heads of DSS, NIA, customs, immigration, NDIC, National Commissioner for Insurance, Inspector General of Police. All these people should be in this board so that you can operate. That is why I said if you build a strong institution, we'll just be talking about one man. The reason they brought in all these people from this is to be able to, if, for example, something is happening that requires custom, you just tell the Controller General of Custom, can we have this fast? If it has to do with police, Inspector General of Police, can we have this? Now, it is that same act that deals with the powers of EFCC that they can go to people's houses, block their telephones, freeze their accounts ex parte, attach their properties ex parte. It is the same law that says the head of this organization, who shall be the chief executive, shall be appointed by the president, but subject to confirmation by the Senate. Subject to means dependent on, predicated on, subjugated to, inured in. In other words, without the Senate, you cannot have this man. Oh, they now say, oh, because Section 171 mentioned permanent secretaries and extra ministerial departments, then EFCC can come there. No. No. In law, thank you. In law, there's already a specific law. In law, there's what you call the ejus dem generis rule. You interpret things according to their make. When you say chicken, bird, vulture, you are still on the right path. You can't say chicken, bird, vulture. Then you say cow, dog, goat. They are different things. So when you say permanent secretaries, the Constitution was referring to people that the president can appoint, hire, and fire and tell as he likes. Without reference to the legislature. God bless you. The president, for example, can say today, we need 500 permanent secretaries in Nigeria. He can create 500 ministries. So far, it is not less than 36. He can say to save costs, we need only 5 permanent secretaries. So when you read it, extra ministerial departments are departments within the bureaucracy of the presidency to aid administration, like ecological fund. Before the DMO, Debt Management Office, was enacted into a law, it was an extra ministerial department. As soon as it became enacted into a law, all the powers and functions and composition have to be found in that act. So you cannot have EFCC without the EFCC Establishment Act. Do you know what they have been doing? By saying, I also disagree with the Vice President Yemi Oshabaji, who told Falana SAS line. They are wrong. What they are saying is, take some aspects of this law because you like them. Then discuss with these aspects because you don't like them. It's like the bird called Chichidodo, discussed by Ayi Kwe Ama in his book, The Beautiful Ones Are Not Yet Born, that epic novel. The bird hates human excrement, human physics, with all his heart. But do you know what it does? When a person is defecating in the forest, the bird perches on a nearby tree, watching the physics decay, the putrescence. As soon as the physics has sufficiently decayed and maggots are wriggling out, the bird pounces on the maggots. The food of the bird, Chichidodo, is maggots that wriggle out of decaying physics, which it hates with all its might. Put another way, it's like saying you don't like beans, you hate beans, but your best food is akara and momoy. It's like saying you hate heat, but the place you want to be found in is in the kitchen.
Or you hate chicken, but you like eggs.
Yes, you hate chicken, but your best food is egg. Or you don't want to be wet, but you like jumping into the river. So you cannot approbate and reprobate. You cannot blow hot and cold simultaneously. Never. You either throw away the entire EFCC Act, and then we know that there's no EFCC, or you perfect all the acts. Now, in America, my brother, because we borrow from America, if you don't know your history, you cannot know where you are, and you will not know where you are going to. Presidentialism was borrowed under Shehu Shagari in 1979. How is it done in America? In America, there have been 9 cabinet rejections. There have been 13 withdrawals, either by the people themselves or by the president to save face. Right? In 1789, the first refusal by Senate was of one Fishburne, Benjamin Fishburne. The Senate rejected him, and that was the end. Because once you reject a minister, for example, in Nigeria, you cannot keep the person in position and say he's acting minister. You reject an ambassador, you say he's acting ambassador. Then in 1834, Roger Taney, under President, what was the name of the president, was rejected by the Senate for the position of Attorney General. The president quietly withdrew his name, and that was the end of it. Last year, under the new Senate rules made in November last year, Debo Adegbile of Nigeria pedigree was nominated by Obama, a very brilliant 47-year-old man, to head the Human Rights Department of the Justice System, or the Justice Department, the Human Rights section of the Justice Department. The Senate rejected him. Why? They said he had participated in an appeal involving one Abu Dama, who had killed a Philadelphian policeman and was therefore regarded as a terrorist. For that reason, the Senate rejected him. In 2001, within the first 90 days of his position, and the first time ever in 30 years, President Bush nominated John Tower to be Secretary of Defense. Had the Senate rejected him, President Bush almost cried. He was in New York. He called his chief of staff and said, well, see, they have rejected, they have their reasons. Withdraw his name and put in another one. Only in February this year, Donald Trump one person that Donald Trump nominated for the position of, what was his name? The man withdrew his name quietly because he was accused of sexual abuse and spousal abuse. There have been, between 1987 and 1996, yes, Flynn. Between 1987 and 1996, the American Senate refused to act on 160 presidential nominees. They may even decide not to act. But that is the end of it. They could act for bad motive, for good motive, but once they have rejected, that is the end. Of 160 justices to the Supreme Court, the Senate has rejected 36.
Now, it's very interesting what you have said, and it looks like you believe in the sanctity of law in a very, very unsacred society. How can it work? You gave the instance of God and Adam and Eve. God created the perfect society. So if you give a law and somebody violates it, it's easy. It's easy for you to say, this person is guilty. But the society knows that this is, the society knows that this is a corrupt society. Knows that their leaders steal their money. And when you come and use the law to defend them, and you seem in the face of the law to have won, it's another thing to win in the face of the law, it's another thing to win in the case of justice. And people believe that justice is not God, because know that in history, the law has been used to do so many things. The law was used, I know you read it, the law was used to keep Nelson Mandela in jail, the law was used to hang Ken Saro-Wiwa. The law was used by the same colonial powers to destroy Veranwe, to Nana of Nana, and all the other people, to keep possession of Okpobo. They use the same law.
Yeah, but there's no alternative to rule of law.
So we are surrendering to
Hold on.
whose
No.
rule of law?
The rule of law made by the society itself. If you agree.
By the elite.
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, then, if you agree that we have a constitution, I've always said that this constitution itself is Decree number 57 of 1999. I don't believe in it. It is not autochthonous. It is not homegrown.
Exactly.
It was not made by the people, for the people, by the people. It cannot give democracy defined by Abraham Lincoln in his 1783 Gettysburg Declaration as a government of the people, for the people, and by the people. But for now, that is the only document we are having, apart from the Constitution of Midwest Region made on the 10th of August 1963, when it had its own independence from Western region through a popular plebiscite. All the constitutions we have been making are not by the people. But for now, we have that constitution. As section 1, subsection 1 says, this constitution shall be supreme. Then section 1, subsection 3 says, if there's any other law whose provisions are inconsistent with this, that law, to the extent of the inconsistency. In other words, because we are not animals living in George Orwell's animal kingdom, animal farm, we still have to obey certain laid down rules. That is why you have the legislature in section 4, the executive in section 5, the judiciary in section 6. The legislature make laws, the executive executes, the judiciary interprets. So you cannot say because you are in a hurry to wipe out corruption, therefore you will now condemn people and kill them unheard. Even armed robbers, my kidnappers are being tried. They are being defended by lawyers. They are paying the lawyers. You cannot begin to ask the lawyer, this professional fees, ask the client, the professional fees you are paying me, is it from ransom money paid by my Ozekhome?
It's like the church going to count all the tithes
and say yes.
Which one was stolen?
Yeah, which of you, all these tithes here, who come forward, who amongst you here stole it? So you cannot know. There still have to be what you call irreducible minimum of societal behavior. That is why nobody can just come to your house and barge in. It's because he knows there is a law which says he cannot do that. Otherwise, we will carry clubs, mache, and iron sticks and kill ourselves. So we must subject ourselves to the rule of law. Justice J.I.C. Taylor, we didn't just start, corruption did not start now. And let me warn, we are over-glamorizing and over-edifying corruption. And if you do that, you will have capital flight. No international businessman will come and invest in your country if all the risk every day is corruption, corruption, corruption. You turn the next page of Nation newspaper, corruption, corruption. Sun newspaper, corruption, corruption. Vanguard, Guardian, Daily Trust, corruption, corruption. They will say it's everything. In fact, a friend of mine, a friend of mine asked, is your country just about corruption? Corruption is an international citizen. It's not a Nigerian citizen. That is why even the United Nations have laws against corruption. The African Charter on Human and People's Rights have laws against corruption. Corruption as far back as 1968 was already so much, in fact, before 1966, that when Major Kaduna Nzogu Chukwuma played out his military purge on the 15th of January 1966, he said our enemies are the 10%ers, the corrupt elements, those that want to make the country look big for nothing before international circles, the nepotists. He had already identified corruption. In 1968, Justice J.I.C. Taylor.
That was 10%. They don't do 10%.
Yeah, well, with the dynamics of society. Justice J.I.C. Taylor, in the case of Ray Mohammed Olayori, said, yes, every sensible Nigerian should be against the prevalent incidents of corruption. But if we are to live by the rule of law, if we are to have a just and decent society, we must obey the rule of law. The alternative is chaos and anarchy. And that is what the defense regulations themselves are. Chaos and anarchy arise in a state of fascism when there's no law and order. And we don't want that. So in fighting corruption, They are not ambivalent. You can fight corruption and still respect human rights. What is the problem of fighting corruption because you are a person? You have stolen so amount. This is the evidence we have against you. But don't join the mob hysteria or the lynch them without fair hearing group. It will not serve us. It will not work.
It looks like you have agreed that it is the best you can make of this constitution that you are doing. And the best of this constitution has not been able to help us against all the elite tyranny and corruption, which means that you SANS are part of the problem. You agree?
Just like you journalists. You are part of, in fact, you journalists are even guiltier, because under section 22 of the Constitution, the imperfect Constitution, you are to hold every government accountable and responsible to the people. Many of you don't. Yes. Many of you side the government in power. Many of you side the government and clap for them. Many of them degrade. Many of you clap for government when they degrade human rights people. They treat them like animals. They hooded people. When DSS operatives hooded, they went to justices' houses between 12 midnight and 5 a.m. and broke down their doors and windows, and people clapped. You could have surrounded their houses, thrown a ring around it. In the morning, knock at the door by 7 a.m. Warrant of search. We want to search you. But one of the judges, Justice Ademola, after 18 counts charge that were predicated on nothing, like Shakespeare would put it, in Julius Caesar, it was a tale by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing.
On that significant note,
nothing was there, nothing was found. Yeah. It collapsed like a pack of cards because it had been tried. But the judge had been stigmatized. He had been recused from his duties. Thank God the Lagos State government had just invited the woman, the wife, who was co-charged with it, to come and take over her position. We don't convict before trial. We convict after trial. We try before conviction. Corruption, I have said elsewhere, is the 37th state of Nigeria, and the most powerful and the richest. Right. We must crush it. But in crushing it, we must do it within our legal regime, within our constitutional organogram, within decency, within the rule of law, within the respect for fundamental human rights, which differentiate us from the lower classes of animals. On that note, I will say God bless Nigeria.
All right. And on that note, thank you very much, Mike Ozekhome, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, who has done his best in this very oratorical flourish to defend the Constitution from his point of view. And so you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
And a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for being around. You'll come again.
I appreciate you. I'll come again.
No problem.
Again and again.
Thank you for being part of the show today. Join me next week for another edition of the program. And until then, be good.